beg to move that this House do now adjourn.
The question is that this House do now adjourn. Just before I call the Honourable Lady, can I appeal to order? Can I appeal to members who are leaving the chamber to do so quickly and quietly, affording the same courtesy to the Honourable Lady that they would wish to be extended to them in similar circumstances. Kerry McCarthy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think I want to start by expressing my sympathy for the Minister here tonight. It can never be much fun doing the late-night adjournment debate, and I'm fairly sure that this isn't an issue dear to his heart. This is the first time World Vegan Day has been marked in Parliament. The chefs have done a sterling job with vegan dishes in the main restaurants on the parliamentary estate every day this week. And earlier today, the Vegan Society event was swamped by MPs and staff, lured there by the promise of free vegan cupcakes, which were courtesy of the award-winning Ms Cupcake, who's just won contracts to supply her cakes to the Olympics and Paralympics, not because her cakes are vegan, but because they're delicious. As a vegan of nearly 20 years standing, I'm very fortunate to represent a seat in Bristol, because it not only plays host to the largest vegan fair in Europe each year, it also has some great restaurants and shops catering for vegans, like Cafe Kino, Cafe Maitreya, Wild Oats, Better Foods and the Sweet Mart. And I'm pleased to be joined tonight in the chamber by my vegan comrades, the Honourable Member for Derby North and the Honourable Member for Kilmarnock and Loudoun. We are apparently the largest vegan caucus in the world. In response to a DEFRA survey in 2007 on public behaviour and attitudes towards the environment, about 2% answered yes to the question whether they were vegan. The number of converts is growing. Former fast food lover Bill Clinton has adopted a vegan diet for health reasons. He said that previously he'd been playing Russian roulette with his health. And last week, both Ozzy Osbourne, the man who used to bite the head off bats, and Russell Brand announced that they decided to become vegan after watching the film Forks Over Knives. Other celebrity vegans include Joaquin Phoenix, Alicia Silverstone, Ellen DeGeneres, Carl Lewis, Woody Harrelson, Bryan Adams, Chrissy Hynde, Alanis Morissette, Benjamin Zephaniah, and even Mike Tyson. So when people say to me, "You don't look like a vegan," I'm not quite sure what they mean. A vegan diet means not eating meat, fish, dairy, eggs, or products derived from them. Ethical vegans also avoid wearing leather, wool, or silk, and buying or using products that are tested on animals or contain animal products. I think it's a personal choice how far you want to take it. Some vegans are much more strict than others, and I think that's fine. Amongst the many prejudices against vegans is that they're always preaching to others and trying to convert them. I don't think that's true. I think we're actually incredibly tolerant. We're always very polite when others ask, "Don't you ever get tempted by a bacon sandwich?" Indeed, as the whip here said to me only a moment ago. And we always pretend that we've never heard anyone make the Spock from Star Trek vegan Vulcan joke before, even though we hear it practically every day. In fact, most vegans I know are actually rather coy about explaining why they're vegan, mostly because it tends to be asked when you're sitting at a dinner table full of meat eaters, and it seems rather impolite to do so. But seeing as we're not at a dinner party now, here's the ethical case, the health case, and the environmental case for being vegan. If you're a vegetarian for ethical reasons because you believe killing and eating animals is wrong, then you really ought to be vegan too. The average human eats more than 11,000 animals in his or her lifetime. But millions of calves and chicks are also killed every year as waste products of milk and egg production. I confess it took a long time for me for the penny to drop that cows are not some kind of constant milk-producing machine. Just like every other animal, including human females, they only produce milk to nurse their young. The dairy industry means artificially forcing more milk out of them, 10 to 20 times more than they need to feed their calves, causing painful mastitis and lameness because of their huge udders, taking their calves away early, and in the case of male dairy calves which are useless to the dairy industry, either shooting them at birth or exporting them live to the rest of the EU for the veal trade. The average lifespan of a dairy cow is 6 years compared to a natural lifespan of 20 to 25 years. 100,000 male calves a year are deemed a surplus byproduct on Britain's dairy farms because they cannot give birth or produce milk. An undercover investigation by the Bristol-based vegetarian campaign Viva showed a calf taken from its mother and shot in the head at Halewood Gate Dairy Farm near Bristol, which supplies milk for Cadbury's, and that was something that was actually reported with horror in the Sun newspaper, of all places. With hens, they're forced to lay 20 times as many eggs as is natural for them. Male chicks are useless to the egg industry. Millions of day-old chicks are killed, many thrown alive into mincers, which are known as homogenisers. And this happens on free-range and organic systems too, despite their claims to be cruelty-free. I've raised before with the Minister my concern about the fact that, having made some progress in areas like banning battery cages, this country is now moving to embrace industrial-scale intensive farming, like the Nocton Mega Dairy Farm, housing thousands of cows in something resembling a multi-storey car park. And the huge... I'll give way in a second. And the huge pig farm planned in Foston, Derbyshire, with more than 20,000 pigs and piglets. I know the Minister's views on this very well, so I'll only touch on it in passing here, and happy to give way.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend for giving way. Will she agree with me that the case for eating less meat and certainly becoming a vegan is also reinforced by the fact that major companies are buying up vast tracts of land in developing nations to grow grain, which is actually displacing subsistence farmers from their land in order to feed that grain to animals? And wouldn't it be better if, when 2 billion people on this planet are going hungry every night, if we actually use the food that we produce in a more efficient way by feeding that food directly to human beings rather than through an animal, which is a very inefficient way of using land?
I agree entirely with my honourable friend, and I will come on to the environmental case for and the food security case, indeed, for being vegan in a moment. But next I want to touch on the health reasons.
For the Honourable Lady, would she be able to point to any peer-reviewed science which supports the allegation she's making about the UK livestock industry, rather than perhaps just the mantra of the animal rights or vegan movement? If there's some peer-reviewed science you can point to, your argument, the Honourable Lady's argument, may carry a bit more weight.
Well, I'm about to cite some scientific research on the health case, and I've also got some very authoritative sources for the environmental case. I think with the ethical case, it's very much about people's personal opinion about whether to treat animals in such a way and to eat animals is something that they feel is ethical or not. So it's not something that I think is science-led, it's something that's led by people's morals.
No, particularly, I'm most grateful for your patience. So the Honourable Lady is saying that the assertions that she recently made in relation to agricultural practices are a personal opinion as opposed to having any evidence to support them.
Well, I'm not quite sure which practices the honourable member is referring to. If he's talking about the average lifespan of a dairy cow, that's something that I've researched and is in the public domain. I know that DEFRA is looking towards trying to get an average lifespan of 8 years for a dairy cow, but 6 years was the average that was cited in the research I looked at. In terms of mastitis, the figure is that 33% of cows suffer from that. I could go on, and I don't have the footnotes in front of me, but it's all out there in the public domain and well researched. On the health case for being vegan, it can be quite difficult to nail down the facts and figures of the health benefits, particularly when organisations such as the Meat Marketing Board and the Milk Marketing Board spend millions on counter-promotions. As I mentioned, the recently released film Forks Over Knives puts the case that switching to a whole foods-based vegan diet can prevent and even reverse serious illnesses. The film gives an overview of the 20-year China-Cornell-Oxford project that a number of diseases such as coronary heart disease, diabetes and cancer can be linked to the Western diet of processed and animal foods. It's certainly true that traditionally very low rates of breast cancer amongst Japanese women are increasing as they adopt Western diets with higher consumption of animal fats. Within Japan, affluent women who eat meat daily have an 8.5 times higher risk of breast cancer than poorer women who rarely or never eat meat.
I thank the Honourable Lady for giving way. How would the Honourable Lady answer the statement by my GP and other GPs that says you should have a balanced diet, and that balanced diet should include meat?
Right. Well, I'll come on to that in a moment, because actually the World Cancer Research Fund did a very authoritative study on that, in which it said that people should avoid processed meat altogether and eat red meat in moderate amounts only. And I think that's the most authoritative study that I've come across. Cancer Research UK is co-funding a massive study called EPIC, the European Prospective Investigation of Cancer, which has found that people who eat 2 daily 80-gram portions of red or processed meat increase their risk of developing bowel cancer by a third compared to those who ate just 20 grams a day. And the same study found that people eating over 100 grams of meat a day had over 3 times the risk of getting stomach cancer. As I mentioned, the World Cancer Research Fund reviewed 263 research papers and concluded in May this year that there was convincing evidence that red and processed meat increased the risk of bowel cancer. When they did so, the National Beef and Sheep Associations, in conjunction with the NFU, issued statements accusing the fund of misleading the public. The fund retaliated by accusing the British meat industry of potentially defamatory and deliberately misleading statements and repeated its message, as I just said to the honourable gentleman, that it was best to avoid processed meat and eat red meat only in moderation. They said, "The fact is that our report is the most comprehensive and authoritative review of the evidence that has ever been published, and it found convincing evidence that red and processed meat both increase the risk of bowel cancer." As I mentioned, there's been a significant rise in the number of people becoming vegan, but I'm happy to give way.
Thank my honourable friend for giving way. And just before she moves off the point about balanced diet, I wonder if she just, for the benefit of members from the opposing benches who seem to be heckling a bit here about what is or isn't a case for veganism, would she agree with me that it is entirely possible to have a perfectly healthy and balanced diet without eating any animal products whatsoever?
I think that's true, and as I said, I've been a vegan for nearly 20 years, the Honourable Lady's been one for 15 years, and the Honourable Gentleman has been one for time immemorial, since the 1970s, I gather. And I think we're all testament to the fact that you can survive perfectly well on a vegan diet. And I have to say, the Honourable Lady referred to the heckling. It's very strange to have heckling in an adjournment debate, and I think perhaps it's testament to the strength of our arguments that people feel that they have to sit there and mock what we're saying rather than actually join in the debate. If I move on to the environmental case for switching to a vegan diet, the 2006 report by the UN Food and Agriculture Organization, Livestock's Long Shadow, stated that the livestock industry is responsible for 18% of global greenhouse gas emissions. That's more than the transport sector, including aviation, which produces 13.5%. And yet there's a huge public debate about aviation and virtually no debate at all about livestock. I did have a debate on the issue in Westminster Hall in 2009, and my honourable friend, the member for Stoke-on-Trent South, made a valiant attempt to put the Sustainable Livestock Bill through the House, only for it to be blocked by the government. And I hope the Minister has time tonight to update the House on some of the progress and some of the promises he made when he responded to my honourable friend's speech almost a year ago today. Meat consumption is, as my honourable friend has already mentioned, an incredibly inefficient way to feed the planet. It takes 8 kilograms of grain to produce 1 kilogram of beef. It takes 100 times as much water to produce 1 kilogram of beef as it does to grow 1 kilogram of vegetables. It takes almost 120 calories of fossil fuel energy to produce 1 calorie of beef, compared to only 2 calories to produce a single calorie of plant protein. And it takes almost 21 square metres of land to produce 1 kilogram of beef, compared with 0.3 square metres to produce 1 kilogram of vegetables. We hear a lot about biofuels and deforestation, but in 2009, about 100 million tonnes of crops were being diverted to create biofuels. Around 760 million tonnes were being used to feed animals. As Raj Patel wrote in his excellent book, Stuffed and Starved, the amounts of grain fed to US livestock would be enough to feed 840 million people on a plant-based diet. The number of food-secure people in the world in 2006, when the book was written, was incidentally 854 million. I'm conscious, Mr. Speaker, that I have not mentioned fish at all during this debate. I would refer the House to the extremely powerful documentary The End of the Line, and also to the series Fish Fight by Hugh Fearnley-Whittinstall, which highlights some of the issues around the sustainability of our fish stocks and the impact of overfishing on our marine environment. Finally, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to conclude with some questions for the Minister. It was disappointing that the climate change talks in Copenhagen, the environmental impact of the livestock sector was given little prominence. What steps is the government taking to ensure that it has a higher priority on the agenda at Rio next year? And will it also be on the agenda at the climate change talks in Durban next month? What discussion on these issues has he had or will he commit to having with our EU counterparts, particularly in the context of reform of the Common Agricultural Policy? According to Compassion in World Farming, at least 80% of the EU's animals are factory farmed. What vision does the Minister have for the future of farming across the EU in terms of animal welfare standards, environmental impact and sustainability? In respect of development policy and global food security, what consideration has been given to the health and environmental factors I have mentioned in terms of feeding the world's growing population? Is this something that is ever discussed between DEFRA and DFID? What assessment has the government made of the health benefits of a diet low in meat and dairy consumption? What guidance is given to the public sector in schools, hospitals and prisons, for example, on the availability of vegan food, both with a view to meeting the needs of those who have chosen a vegan diet, but also with a view to the health benefits? What further progress can be made on the issue of food labelling so that vegans know whether the products they purchase are ethical or not? And can the Minister also confirm that when the EU directive on animal experimentation is transposed into UK law, it will not mean a lowering of standards? And finally, there is concern that the proposed network of marine protected areas to be established under the Marine Act next year will not adequately protect wildlife, and some of our most important marine wildlife sites could even be missed off altogether. Can the Minister provide reassurance on this point, and perhaps also tell us more about what he's doing to tackle, or his department is doing to tackle the issue of overfishing? I do appreciate that with these questions I have at times strayed somewhat outside the Minister's brief, but I hope he can at least give clarity on some of the issues that I've raised, and I thank him for his patience in listening to me.